So in this session we've seen how we use loops to repeat sections of code, and we've looked at three types of loop. So we'll just quickly recap the key points and then refer you to the practical work that you can use to reinforce this very important concept. Iteration is one of the two primary programming constructs that programmers use, the other being selection. Iterative loops in fact use selection to determine whether or not to repeat the section of code identified by the loop, so they are fairly closely linked. There are three types of loop commonly used in programming languages. Do while loops execute the code at least once and then they do the check. So a password prompt is a good example. You always enter your password. It is then checked to see if it's valid. If it is, you can proceed. If it's not, then the password prompt will be reissued, and you might get a limited number of attempts to do it, but you will always do it at least once. The second type of loop is a while loop, and while loops are used when the code inside the loop may not be executed at all, so you do the check before you go into the code. These are often used in data entry or read-write operations to check that the data or the file exists before trying to read or write it, because that would result in some sort of error. And the final type of loop is the for next loop, and these are used when we want to iterate a known number of times, and they are a specialized type of while do loop, the difference being that all of the controlling parts of it are contained on one easy to read and easy to change line. You have to be careful with some programming languages because the syntax of loops is not as standard as it is with selection statements, and basic languages, for example, or Visual Basic, both types of loop, a do while and a while do, begin with the word do. It's the position of the while statement which determines what type of loop it is, whether or not the while is at the top of the loop or at the bottom of the loop. There are lots of examples on Blackboard in the practical worksheets, so I would suggest you go through those, and you can use loops to do all manner of calculations and numerical expressions. So you could look up things like the Fibonacci sequence and see if you can write a loop to do that, and if you can, then see if you can write it using each of the three different loop constructs to see what the differences between them are. So again, as usual, practice makes perfect, so have a go, do as many practicals as you can, and that way you will very quickly get the hang of loops.